a time travel equal mass displacement kind of thing. Kids.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3.
Help, I'm a turtle and I can't get up.
Beware, I hunger.
All rise. No Welcome to Banished. You're in the court of the Honorable Judge Benson. Today I am judging on what should remain and what should be banished. I'm going to try to remain as impartial as humanly and Tomily possible.
Tomily possible. Okay.
I believe, Jake, you are the prosecution.
Yes, I absolutely am prosecution, and I bring to this court, this honorable court, something that's bugged me since the beginning of, since I can remember. I was a young kid, and I don't know if you've ever suffered from PTSD, but this is how I feel when I think about this. It's so deeply impacted me. It's just something so beloved is just ripped away from you and borderline raped. That's the only way I can explain this.
Those are strong words.
Yes, and they are. And I wouldn't use them unless I needed to use them. And
pathetic.
TMNT 3.
You were expecting maybe the Addams Family?
I see. Do you have any opening statements? Defense?
I will not allow for this, and I will not stand for this. I will not allow even one single, even the worst of the Ninja Turtles movies to be banished. You see, I too am filled with nostalgia from my childhood. I don't know how long I'm going to be able to keep this voice up. It'll probably be in and out.
I'll allow it.
I disagree. And I'm going to defend the Ninja Turtles, even the worst of them.
I'm going to bring with me 5 big points as to why TMNT 3 should be banished. Not just for the future, but banished from all existence. It shouldn't exist ever. Shouldn't have existed ever. It needs to be banished. This is the strongest feeling
over
any banished topic we've talked about that I feel.
All right,
so
let's hear the first point.
Point number 1. I might have you, Your Honor. Actually, I might ask the defense. Defense, can you point to which of these villains, and we'll be having this up here, you see that's in the film?
These are not my prescription.
I'm going to save you a second. I'm going to save everybody a second.
We know where this is going.
None.
Have the record show that the defense did not point to any character.
Yeah, none.
Whose side are you on?
None of them.
I'm just letting the record know.
Yeah, fine. There are none. None of these core great characters that are usable. May I point out, why not use Krang? You used Shredder twice. Why not even put Shredder in for a third time? Okay, maybe he's killed off in the second movie. Mm-hmm. Let's assume that. We talked about that last week. That he maybe dead finally. And they celebrated it. We had the scientist. We had him ready to go. Why not just make him Baxter Stockman? He left with what was left of the ooze and knowing full well the potential of it. Mm-hmm. We had all this set up. Why not just use one character out of all these comics and out of these cartoons that were huge? What say you?
what is your point? Like define your first.
There's
point.
a huge villain problem.
Okay, villain problem. So, I'm coming from the stance for most of these where, admittedly, yeah, this was not the best that Turtles could do. But that's not the argument. See, the argument is you're trying to banish Turtles. Now, while I agree that this was not the best Turtles movie, I cannot, as I said in my opening statement, stand for it to be banished. I do not know what kind of allegedly Turtles fan would like to abolish anything in regards to the Ninja Turtles franchise, but that's neither here nor there, I suppose. But yeah, okay, so there's a villain problem, right? But this had two villains. This had the what is he, an emperor? The emperor, and then it had Walker, and Walker's the real villain, and he's a true heel because he's not likable. Now Shredder's cool. Nothing touches Shredder. To your picture there, Krang is a major villain. Bebop, Rocksteady, Shredder. Anybody else in that picture, you have to be pretty deep into Turtles to even know. Baxter Stockman maybe, but
King.
you know, huh? No,
Okay.
yeah, but
King, but okay.
but this had two villains, and it was more focused on the one villain manipulating the other, and then him seeing the error of his ways at the end, and then they dispose of the real villain, and it's about the story. So, yeah, I mean, you got a real heel. You don't have Shredder's cool. We all can agree, right? Shredder's a cool villain, and you can't really touch him. And would it have been cool for them to give Shredder a scepter and he goes back in time with the Turtles? Yeah, that actually would have been pretty cool, in my opinion. But they didn't do that. But the fact is, that point, the villain problem, is not reason enough that we slap this movie out of existence. And I think as far as this villain problem, the attempt was pretty good. You had two villains, there was the confusion there, and Walker is a scummy guy. A real heel, a true heel.
I'm gonna stop you, Seth.
Sure.
I have to go with Jake on this.
Oh,
and you said it yourself. You said it'd be cool if they gave Shredder the scepter and let Shredder do something with it. It doesn't even have to be Shredder. It could be any recognized villain could have got the scepter and gone back in time, and it would have been way better than I don't even know the two guys you talked about. I've seen this movie a number of times, and I couldn't tell you to this day who the villains were.
Okay,
Like some Asian guy. I mean, that's the only thing I remember, So, first point goes to the prosecution.
So,
all right.
So I'm just gonna keep punching you. I'm coming out like Tyson. We're not going to the last round in this one. I'm telling you what.
Not laying my sword down on that last one.
So
anyway.
So, speaking of punching you, this movie, for some reason, didn't double down, but the exact opposite. Just let up on all the violence. So the first movie has 4 big fight scenes. Mm-hmm. Really, 4 really good fight scenes. The second movie has more fight scenes. Now, as a kid, I liked the second movie more than I liked the first movie. As an adult, I see why the first movie, like, they progressively get a little bit worse as it goes. Well, I mean, there's a huge dive from 2 to 3. 4 fights to 5 fights to, like, 3, if you even want to call them 3 fights. No use of the weapons in some iterations of the movie because of we can't have kids watching violence. It's just like, we went from this really raw look at the Turtles in the first movie to a kind of more family-friendly one in the second one, but still raw. The Turtles would say bad words every once in a while, but this third one just toned it down and made it. Sorry, Your Honor, but pussified it for kids. And I don't know, the lack of violence and the lack of just seeing the Turtles kick the piss out of the bad guys really is something I don't agree with, because when you're a kid, what do you want to see? I want to see the Turtles beat the piss out of the bad guys. Like, when I'm playing video games, I want to be a turtle. I want to beat the piss out of the bad guys.
Well, it had more fight scenes than the recent 2. And having seen all of them, I've counted the fight scenes as well. And this one had actually the same amount as the first one. It did not have the amount that the second one had. And Were the fights as good? Probably not. Were they as long? Probably not. There's only two that do greatly stick out. There was the fight by the pond, and then there was the fight at the end. And those fights were, I thought, good. I remember as a kid thinking that those fights went, I don't know, I remember those fights distinctly. Like, they have a lot of nostalgia. I remember those very well. And to me, they held up. I didn't ever have the takeaway feeling that you had from that of like, where's the fighting? It just never something that stuck with me with that. It was, I remember, oh man, I remember a lot of, trying to think how to word this carefully.
Oh, Your Honor, I'm about to fall asleep with this because I mean, this is reminding me of the Turtles movie right now.
It's a personal attack. Object.
That's
Let me just sit here and...
prosecution, you're out of order.
Okay.
Right now.
Thank
Seth
you.
has the floor.
All right.
I never had that takeaway, bottom line. I never had that same feeling like there was less fights. I have watched all those movies back to back. I had the same level of nostalgia still. I get it. I get the reasons why. I've read the Rotten Tomatoes reviews. I've read all the different reviews. And it just... The nostalgia, enough, which is normally how you are, but anyway, the nostalgia for me was enough to carry over to where I see these three movies as a set, as a series. I don't pick it apart and count the fight scenes in the same way. I went back and recently watched them just to count them because you had mentioned to me that I didn't have the same amount. And I was like, that can't be right. I watched them, and maybe by one fight less, but the fighting was the same, and it was good.
I don't judge the movie by fight scenes alone. Going by your point that they've toned down the violence, I do agree that the violence was toned down to try to reach maybe a wider audience. The cartoon series, the violence was greatly toned down to meet some greater, to cater to kids, and I think that's what they did with 3. Fight scenes do not a great movie make. So on this point, I'm going to go with the defense.
It was more about the story, I think, is my bottom line I'm trying to get to.
Hey,
but
I'm on your side here.
Thank you.
Third point.
Third point. Third point is, look at those costumes. Oh my God! The first 2 movies, you had the Jim Henson Company. You had the best looking to this day Turtles on a television screen, or on a screen for that matter. I don't like the way they looked in the last 2 movies by was it Universal? I can't even remember who did those 2. But the New Line Cinema trilogy, which it is a quadrilogy if you really look at it, but New Line Cinema put out the first 3. Those first 2 movies, they look so freaking good. They sounded good. I don't want to cheat and start talking about the voice acting even being better in those than the third, but let's even just focus on the way they looked. The third one, they just looked plastic and cheap and crappy, and they carried that over to the TV show, and it makes you, as a kid even, I remember being like, did they run out of money, or why didn't they just use the old suits? What's going on with this?
So, I was the exact opposite. Not the exact opposite. Basically, what I mean is, as a kid, I didn't notice. I didn't notice there was a difference. I honestly didn't notice there was a difference. I had enough nostalgia to keep the blinders on. I didn't notice the difference until you just told me the other day. And then I was like, oh, yeah, I see it now. But I had enough. I got the rose-colored glasses with nostalgia on this series. And maybe the Turtles' costumes themselves were not great. Probably budget problems at that point. Who knows? You mentioned some different stuff. You've done more research on that specific stuff than I did, because I don't let that type of stuff kill the magic for me, because I know it would. But I liked the other costumes. I liked the samurai outfits. I liked the ninja costumes. Excuse me. I liked, even if you look at Walker, he looks like, they used to talk about Jeff Jarrett in wrestling and how he would dress flamboyant and it'd piss people off, and that was part of what made him such a good heel in the mid-90s. That's kind of how I felt about the Walker character, his rich pirate outfit.
Well, I mean, if you want to go into other costumes, then that feels like it feels like that movie, they were like, oh, hey, remember this samurai movie we did? Remember this, like, this old timey movie we did. Let's pull up some of these costumes from that. Instead of I don't know, like I don't care to see the turtles in that. And I know this isn't really getting into that part of it, but I might talk about a little bit of even the puppetry with the costumes. In the first 2 movies, when they're talking, you see how my lips are moving and you hear the sound of me doing that with it. Now we're doing the third movie, and this is the way the lips moved, because this is how we talk, and this is how the puppetry worked.
I did notice that a couple times, to be honest, and I never noticed that before. But
so you conceding that point?
No,
as
I'm
well?
not conceding.
It sounds like a conceit to me. I do hear both sides here, but the period costumes, the samurai costumes, all that is second fiddle. You're making a Turtles movie. The Turtles costume have to be on point for the Turtles movie.
I get you.
So this point goes to the prosecution.
All right. Point number 4.
And okay, so let me set this picture up for you. So the first movie, let's stay in the shadows, Turtles. We got a little bit of an origin story, and Shredder comes out of the shadows as well, and all of these stories kind of meet up back in Japan, but now we're in New York, and we're the Turtles, and this is our city, and we have to protect it. Kevin McAllister, this is my house, I can protect it. Second movie continues on to that. It's just, even though we're following Ninja Turtles, it's still a really realistic story that it's not hard to follow. But now let's enter in, because we have nothing else to do, I guess, in New York, and no one else to fight here. Let's enter in. April goes to a pawn shop and finds the scepter out of just pure happenstance, and it just happens that the Turtles touch it, and it sends them back in time and brings back these things that these Asians from 500 400 or 500, I think it's 400 years ago, if I remember. 1593. Yeah, 1593 as opposed to 1993 the movie takes place in. So, like, really, really sloppily set up. Like, so if April wasn't at that pawn shop or wherever she gets the scepter, someone else goes on this adventure and not the Turtles, right? Is basically, I mean, that's right. What the concept is, right? And so does that destroy all of space and time if they don't complete their journey? You're just telling me the Turtles happen to fall into this? I don't know. It felt like the worst episode of the TV show.
I think that was the point, is they wanted it to not be consistent with the TV show, but they wanted to make it feel more like the cartoon. And there was a lot of time travel. I recently rewatched some of that with Addison, and there's a lot of jumping through different dimensions, and there's a lot of time travel. And maybe the execution wasn't the best, admittedly, but you had told me, for your point, that the wording you used originally was boring premise. I don't find the premise boring. The execution may not have been great, but the premise, the story was good. Once you get back in time, it's like, we need to fix things. We need to save. They go from saving New York to saving an entire country, essentially, based upon the warring that was happening. And I liked the look of the scepters. That's kind of a sidebar, I suppose. But I did. I grew up with my grandma with the old antique collector. And I thought that was, a little bit unique. It wasn't the same type of stuff as time travel. Yeah, it's a little convenient that, out of everybody that, could have got this in New York, it wasn't Spider-Man, it was the Ninja Turtles, or, I get it. But it's for kids. And that's kind of the idea. And you get them to old-time Japan, and then from there it's a good story.
Well, we might have been watching a different movie, because where I'm leading to is we have the potential of the Turtles going back in time and actually traveling somehow with the scepter, not only through time, but through a different part of the world. So we have all this potential for a really exciting story, but instead I'm going to sit here and try to keep my eyes awake while we sit around in some farm with some kid that we don't really know, instead of the Turtles going to figure things out, or going to try to do something, instead of just reacting to what bad guys are doing behind the scenes that they don't even know.
I don't even know what he just said. He talked about me being boring. I don't even know what the hell just came out of his mouth. Go ahead, Judge.
I'm a pretty big fan of the Turtles. I mean, to let me know. And I do have a record with siding with time travel on this show.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to go with the defense on this one just because they're trying something different. I know the first two have been based in reality, but the Turtles historically in the comics and the cartoon series are jumping through dimensions, like he said, and doing time travel. So I think at this point, I'm going with the defense.
Your final point.
Just for the try.
yeah.
Just for the try.
Right.
And I would have loved to see a try of maybe Dimension X. That'd have been fantastic.
I'm not disagreeing with you on that.
Right.
It would have been expensive though. But here's and again I saved the best for last.
An ace in his sleeve, if it were.
Yeah.
Supposedly.
Yes.
Unless he changed the
This
game.
movie destroyed the franchise. This was the last of these movies for a very long time. I think it was around 16 years until we got to see the next movie. Maybe my math's wrong there. I think it was from 1993 was the year this movie was released, and it was circa 2007 for TMNT, which is not. I mean, it's
Unofficial
technically
sequel.
TMNT 4, but it's not. It alludes to it, but there's a lot of inconsistencies in the movie that make it to where you can say whatever. I think it's TMNT 4, but it killed the franchise for such a long time, where we had release after release after release, like within 2 years of each other, and they had actually planned a 4 and they had actually planned a 5. I don't know if you knew that, but this killed it because kids hated it. Kids hated it.
So, your wording. I'm going off your wording.
Sure.
You said it killed the franchise, and you even basically said it killed the franchise for not forever, obviously, but for a specific period of time, a long period of time. Now, if we look at that, and I looked up various movie scores, all 3 of the movies scored poorly. They did. And yes, this one scored more poorly than the other 2, but they're all around that same 20 percentile range if you go back and look at the scores. Also,
I don't think movie critics existed anymore.
But
So Seth is. I might put this. Seth is alluding to critic score. I'm alluding to cinema score.
I'm talking box office
Okay.
too. No,
ahead.
I looked it up.
I
box
thought
office,
on this show we banished them.
and we take turns.
critics.
Banished critics.
Oh, right. Just a good point. But anyway, no, I looked up the scores too, and the amount of money made, and yes, progressively got more poor, but they all 3 didn't do awesome. The first 2 didn't do good enough to make the third one as good as it probably should have been, admittedly. And it didn't kill the franchise because we also got the cartoon continued on. That's part of the franchise. Several video games, part of the franchise. And that not so awesome Fox TV show came after this that lasted for a couple, 2-3 years. And no, that wasn't great either.
Your Honor.
But
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I didn't interrupt you this much, just to be fair. It didn't kill the franchise. He said his words was it killed the franchise. It didn't. It didn't do amazing things for the franchise. But let's do the overall point. You made 5 points trying to banish something that you're supposed to be a bigger fan of than we are. And yet, I'm not. I don't think it wasn't a good movie. It wasn't as bad as you think it is. I know that. But it's not something that should be banished. I wouldn't even want to banish the TV show as bad as that was. The Real People one with the chick. I can't even think of her
The
name.
Next Mutation.
Yes.
So the fact that that you can sit and I mean it tells you something about how much we love the Turtles is that we have 2 different viewpoints here where I love the Turtles so much, the first 2 movies and every movie that's not this movie. I love all of those movies. I even love the first TMNT that what's his name? Let's Blow Everything Up did. The second one's better.
Right. I agree with that.
But the fact that you're willing to say, "Yeah, I'll accept this, and I want more of this," and you're not willing to say, "Let's get rid of this so that we can put something better in history in its place."
That's not
It's
what
just-
the concept of this show
okay,
is. This
yeah, that's
concept
fine,
of the
that's
show
fine.
is banished.
That's fine. I just want to
That's
banish it so that we see Turtles as not that. We see Turtles as everything else that's existed and not that. I would even go as far as saying let's banish the Fox TV show because of this movie, what wasn't killed, what the movies that were killed, that franchise that was killed, what was left over was, well, we still have these costumes and we have a slot on Fox, so let's put the worst TV show on Fox mornings.
Movie fatigue would have made it happen anyway.
I just don't follow that at all.
That poor
and
box office
again,
ratings.
Again, I think these 5 points laid out, every one of those is what leads up to killing the franchise off. Don't we want to live in a Turtles world where the first 2 movies continue on and the third one never happened?
I don't. I do not. I wouldn't change anything.
Explain.
Because mostly...
Explain what the third movie contributes. This is kind of...
You on both of our...
You say it doesn't contribute. I've got your side.
Okay.
The franchise is better without the third movie existing.
It's better with a different third movie existing.
Even without it.
Or
that's
without the movie.
We're banishing
yes.
the movie.
Or without the movie. Yeah.
It contributed a lot more than I think people give it credit for. I think it contributed more than I can even probably think of on the spot because I wasn't prepared for that question. And now that I'm done stalling, I think it contributed what the Ninja Turtles look like without Shredder. And every time they try things without Shredder, for example the TV show, it goes to show why Shredder is like the fifth, not the fifth Ninja Turtle, but like he's the fifth most important character. They're all 5 even. The 4 Ninja Turtles, each as important as the other, and Shredder is number 5. And every time you try something without Shredder, it shows that, hey, they can stand on their own, but it's not as good. And so it's sometimes not awesome things have to happen to learn from, to better ourselves, and to say, hey, maybe we can go back with the third movie if they do a third one at this point. I don't know if they will. I haven't heard anything, but
they're actually rebooting.
Right, that's what I was thinking too. That's what I thought I heard.
To your point, you just said that they can't do as good without Shredder. The 4th movie did better without Shredder.
The 4th movie?
TMNT.
Oh.
So, I'm going to probably stop you both here.
All right, I just won't make my point.
You want to continue? Go ahead.
No, it's fine.
I'm just going to say, by comparison, what you're saying is they can't do a good Turtles movie without Shredder. It's the same thing as saying you couldn't do a good Batman movie without Joker, and there has been. With Jake arguments, I don't feel that the third movie's contributed anything to the franchise.
But should it be banished entirely?
I think it should be.
Ooh.
I mean, I think it should be banished because it's not contributing, and it's with it being gone in the world, it brings the whole average up of the
mistrial.
Turtles.
A mistrial. I demand.
Somebody dial 911.
I have a feeling we're going to be here for a very long time.
So, by the honor invested in me by this time stone, I'm going to banish TMNT 3. I don't even know the name of the subtitle.
There's not.
There's not one.
There's not
Second
one.
movie got
Banished.
got one.
They're just not real Turtles fans. They're just not.
You know when the Turtles did time better? Every other time.
Thanks for watching Banished. If you like this, remember to prescribe to Nerd Buffet. Also share and like this.
And I gotta say, I set you up for a really hard one to defend.
Yeah, it
Seriously,
was
good job.
it was hard.
I was getting like, oh God, how?
Yeah,
What's going
It
on?
was hard.
It is a tough one, and I applaud your efforts, but we should never speak of it again.
That's probably fine.